If someone leaving broke you, it is not because you are weak. It is not because you cared too much or because you were not strong enough to move on. It is because your mind quietly turned that person into a place to feel safe, a place where you could breathe, feel seen, and feel stable. And when they left, it did not only feel like losing them, it felt like losing the ground beneath your life. Buddhism teaches something uncomfortable, but deeply freeing. Pain is real, and pain is human. But suffering grows when the mind refuses to release. Release does not mean forgetting or acting like it never mattered. It means stopping the inner fight, the replaying, the bargaining, the secret hoping that reality will reverse itself. The heart can hurt, but the mind does not have to tighten around the hurt. In this video, you will learn how to let go without becoming cold. You will learn how to care without clinging, how to grieve without losing yourself, and how to stand steady again. Because when you build a calm foundation inside you, your peace is no longer held hostage by who stays, who leaves, or who chooses you. Lesson 1. Pain is natural, suffering is created. In Buddhist philosophy, pain is not something to be feared or avoided. It is a natural part of being alive. The Buddha never taught that life would be free from loss, change, or heartbreak. He taught that these experiences are woven into existence itself. When someone leaves your life, the pain that arises is simply the nervous system responding to impermanence. This pain does not mean you failed, loved incorrectly, or lacked wisdom. It means you are human, living in a world that is constantly changing. Suffering begins when the mind refuses to accept this change. Buddhism makes a clear distinction between pain and suffering. Pain is what naturally arises when something meaningful ends. Suffering is what the mind adds when it resists reality. The mind replays what happened, revisits old conversations, and imagines different outcomes. It asks why this had to happen and searches endlessly for answers. This mental resistance creates a second wound on top of the first. The Buddha taught that this added suffering is not imposed by life, but constructed by clinging. Clinging takes many subtle forms. It appears as attachment to the past, attachment to how things used to feel, and attachment to the belief that life should not have changed this way. When the mind clings, it tightens around pain and refuses to let it move. Instead of allowing grief to rise and fall, the mind keeps it alive through repetition and resistance. This is why suffering can last far longer than the original loss. Letting go, in Buddhism, does not mean erasing emotion or becoming indifferent. It means releasing the demand that reality be different from what it is. When the mind stops arguing with impermanence, pain is allowed to follow its natural course. It comes, it is felt fully, and it passes. The second layer of suffering no longer forms because the mind is no longer feeding it. Through this understanding, a quiet freedom appears. You still feel loss, but it does not consume you. You grieve without becoming trapped in grief. This is the wisdom the Buddha pointed to. Not the removal of pain, but the end of unnecessary suffering. Lesson 2. You're not missing the person, you're missing the feeling. In Buddhist philosophy, attachment rarely attaches to people as they truly are. It attaches to the experience they created inside us. When someone leaves, the pain is often misunderstood. We believe we are longing for the person themselves, but if we look more closely, we see that the mind is reaching for something else. It is reaching for relief. Relief from loneliness. Relief from uncertainty. Relief from the discomfort of being alone with our own thoughts. The Buddha taught that the mind constantly seeks pleasant sensations and tries to escape unpleasant ones. When a person once brought feelings of safety, attention, comfort, or validation, the mind quietly labeled them as a source of peace. Over time, their presence became a signal to relax. Their voice calmed the body. Their attention made the mind feel settled. When they are gone, the mind does not only grieve the relationship, it panics because its familiar source of relief has disappeared. This is why longing can feel so urgent. It is not only emotional, it is physical. The body remembers how it used to soften in their presence. The mind remembers how it used to rest. Without awareness, the mind concludes that relief exists only outside, in that person and nowhere else. Buddhism calls this a misunderstanding. It is not the person who created peace. It was the temporary conditions surrounding their presence. Buddhism teaches that chasing relief outside always leads to suffering because external conditions are unstable. People change. Attention shifts. Comfort comes and goes. When your sense of ease depends on something impermanent, anxiety is guaranteed. The mind lives in fear of losing what soothes it. The practice, then, is not to suppress longing, but to understand it. Instead of asking why you miss them, Buddhism invites you to ask what feeling the mind is searching for: safety, warmth, belonging. When you see this clearly, the chase begins to soften. Through mindfulness and awareness, you begin cultivating steadiness inside. The breath becomes a place of return. The body becomes a place of grounding. Awareness becomes a refuge. When relief is no longer outsourced, longing loses its power. You may still remember the person, but the desperation fades. Peace becomes something you grow within, not something you beg from outside. Lesson 3. The mind clings to a version, not a real person. In Buddhist philosophy, attachment is not directed toward reality as it is. It is directed toward an image the mind creates and refuses to update. When someone leaves your life, the mind does not hold on to who they are now. It holds on to who they were at a certain moment, when things felt safe, familiar, or meaningful. This frozen image becomes the object of attachment, even though life has already moved on. People change, emotions change, circumstances change. This is not a failure of love or character. It is simply the nature of impermanence. But the mind resists this movement. It selects a memory, a phase, a version of the person, and treats it as if it should still exist. Buddhism teaches that this refusal to accept change is a major source of suffering. What the mind often calls love is actually clinging to a memory. It replays how things used to be, how the person spoke, how they made you feel, how the relationship once functioned. The mind says, this was real, this was meaningful, so it should still be here. But Buddhism reminds us that meaning does not require permanence. Something can be real and still end. When you cling to an old version of someone, you are no longer relating to reality. You are relating to the past. This creates friction, because reality cannot match a memory. The present moment will always feel wrong when it is compared to something that no longer exists. This is why longing feels so painful. You are asking the present to become the past. Letting go begins with a quiet acceptance. Not acceptance that the loss did not matter, but acceptance that the version you are holding on to is gone. This does not mean the connection was meaningless. It means it has completed its form. Buddhism teaches that all forms arise, change, and pass away. Relationships are no exception. When you accept that the version you miss no longer exists, something softens inside. The struggle weakens. You stop chasing an image that reality cannot provide. Memory is allowed to be memory, not a demand. Love is allowed to become appreciation instead of grasping. This understanding does not erase sadness, but it removes confusion. You grieve what was without trying to resurrect it. And in that clarity, the mind begins to loosen its grip, allowing peace to return naturally. Lesson 4. When you cling, you live in memory, not reality. Buddhist philosophy teaches that suffering is not only about what happens to us, but about where the mind chooses to live. When you cling to someone who is no longer present, your body may be sitting here, breathing, moving through the day, but your mind is elsewhere. It lives in old conversations, familiar moments, imagined explanations, and unfinished endings. Life continues, yet the mind remains suspended in what has already passed. This is one of the most subtle forms of suffering. Nothing is actively happening in the present moment, yet pain keeps repeating. The Buddha described this as the mind feeding on memory and imagination instead of reality. Each time the mind replays what was said, what should have been said, or what might still happen, it steps out of the present and into a mental world that cannot offer peace. Memory becomes a place of residence rather than a passing thought. Buddhism teaches that the present moment is the only place where peace can grow. Not because the present is always pleasant, but because it is the only place that is real. The past cannot be changed, and the future has not yet formed. When the mind lives in memory, it is no longer responding to life as it is. It is responding to an image, a story, or a feeling that no longer exists in the same way. This is why clinging feels exhausting. You are carrying a world that reality no longer supports. The mind often believes that replaying the past is a form of loyalty or love. It feels wrong to stop thinking about someone who mattered. But Buddhism makes a clear distinction between remembering and clinging. Remembering is natural. Clinging is when memory becomes a demand. When the mind insists that the present should feel like the past, or that life should pause until something returns. Release, in Buddhism, does not mean erasing memory. It means returning attention to what is actually happening now, the feeling of your breath, the weight of your body, the sounds in the room, the simple fact that life is unfolding in this moment, whether the mind agrees or not. Each time attention returns to reality, the grip of memory weakens slightly. This return is not dramatic. It happens quietly, again and again. The mind wanders back to the past, and awareness gently brings it back. Not with force, not with judgment, but with clarity. Over time, this practice restores presence. You stop living half in yesterday and half in imagination. You begin living where your life actually is. When you return to what is, something changes. Pain may still arise, but it no longer multiplies. You are no longer fighting reality with memory. You are meeting life as it is. And in that meeting, peace becomes possible again, not because the past was fixed, but because the mind finally came home. Lesson 5. Attachment is often fear in disguise. Buddhist philosophy teaches that attachment does not arise from love itself, but from fear hiding beneath love. On the surface, attachment looks like care, devotion, and emotional closeness. But when examined with awareness, it often reveals something quieter and more uncomfortable. A fear of being alone. A fear of not being enough on your own. A fear that without this person, life will lose its meaning or direction. The mind is skilled at disguising fear. It rarely announces itself clearly. Instead, it wraps fear in familiar language and calls it love. It says, "This person matters to me. I cannot live without them. I need them to feel whole." These thoughts feel sincere, even noble, but Buddhism asks you to look deeper. Are these thoughts about appreciating another human being, or are they about protecting yourself from emptiness and uncertainty? Fear thrives on dependency. When a person becomes the source of safety, validation, or purpose, the mind begins to cling not because of love, but because it is afraid of what will happen without them. The attachment tightens as a survival strategy. The mind believes that holding on will prevent pain, loneliness, or collapse. In this way, attachment is not a sign of deep connection. It is a sign that fear has quietly taken control. This is why attachment often brings anxiety instead of peace. Love that is free feels spacious and alive. Attachment feels tense and vigilant. The mind constantly scans for signs of distance, change, or loss. It worries about being replaced, forgotten, or left behind. Buddhism teaches that this state of vigilance is suffering in motion. Nothing may have gone wrong yet, but peace has already disappeared. Fear also distorts perception. When attachment is driven by fear, You no longer relate to the person as they are. You relate to the threat of losing them. Every silence feels dangerous. Every change feels personal. The mind becomes reactive, protective, and controlling, even if it believes it is acting out of care. Buddhism does not condemn this fear. It understands it as a habit formed by misunderstanding. The mind believes safety exists outside itself. It believes another person can protect it from impermanence. This belief keeps fear alive. Freedom begins when this fear is seen clearly, not pushed away, not judged, but recognized. When you see that attachment is fear trying to survive, the grip softens. Love no longer needs to protect you. It can simply exist. And in that clarity, the heart becomes lighter and the mind begins to rest. Lesson 6. Letting go is not hate, it is clarity. One of the greatest misunderstandings about letting go is the belief that it means becoming cold, distant, or uncaring. The mind often resists release because it confuses letting go with rejection. It tells you that if you let go, it means the person never mattered, or that you are erasing what you shared. Buddhist philosophy teaches something very different. Letting go is not the absence of care, it is the presence of clarity. Clarity begins when you see the difference between caring and clinging. Caring allows things to exist as they are. Clinging demands that they remain a certain way. When you cling, your peace depends on another person's choices, attention, or presence. Your inner state rises and falls based on whether they stay close or drift away. Buddhism teaches that this dependency is not love. It is a misunderstanding that turns connection into suffering. Letting go means releasing this inner demand. It means you stop asking another person to carry the responsibility for your peace. You stop making your emotional stability depend on their behavior, consistency, or availability. This does not mean you stop respecting them. It means you stop negotiating with reality through them. You can acknowledge that someone mattered deeply and still accept that they are no longer meant to walk beside you. Buddhism does not teach you to deny the value of past connections. It teaches you to recognize when a form has completed itself. When a relationship ends, clinging tries to preserve it beyond its natural life. Letting go allows it to remain what it was, without forcing it to continue as something it can no longer be. This clarity brings relief. When you are no longer internally tied to another person's actions, the mind relaxes. You stop scanning for signals. You stop interpreting silence. You stop carrying conversations that are no longer happening. Energy that was trapped in longing and fear returns to you. Letting go also restores dignity. You no longer have to chase, explain, or shrink yourself to maintain connection. You meet life honestly, without resentment and without self-abandonment. Buddhism teaches that this is a form of compassion, not only toward others, but toward yourself. When letting go comes from clarity, there is no bitterness in it. There is understanding. You respect what was, accept what is, and allow yourself to move forward without closing your heart. This is the quiet strength Buddhism points to again and again. Lesson 7. Stop asking people to complete you. One of the heaviest beliefs the mind carries is the quiet thought that says, you are not whole on your own. It does not always appear clearly. Sometimes it hides behind longing, sometimes behind devotion, sometimes behind the fear of being alone. But underneath it all is the same idea. Without this person, something essential about you is missing. Buddhism teaches that this belief is one of the deepest roots of suffering. You can feel this belief in moments of separation. When someone leaves, it does not only hurt because they are gone. It hurts because the mind believes your stability left with them. You begin to feel unfinished, as if a part of you has been taken away. The Buddha taught that this sense of incompleteness is not a fact. It is a mental habit formed by misunderstanding where wholeness comes from. In Buddhist philosophy, no person is meant to complete you because nothing was missing to begin with. Wholeness is not something another human being can give. Attention, affection, and reassurance can soothe the mind temporarily, but they cannot create lasting stability. When peace depends on being chosen, seen, or consistently held by someone else, anxiety is guaranteed. The mind becomes vigilant, always afraid of losing the source of its balance. This is why relationships built on emotional completion often feel heavy. There is pressure on both sides. One person feels responsible for holding the other together. The other lives in quiet fear of losing the one who makes them feel whole. Buddhism does not see this as a failure of love. It sees it as confusion about the source of peace. Buddhism teaches that wholeness is trained, not received. It grows through awareness, not through attention. When you learn to sit with your own mind without needing it to be distracted or validated, something changes. You begin to notice that the feeling of being incomplete rises and falls like any other sensation. It is not permanent. It is not you. Through mindfulness, you learn to stay present with discomfort instead of escaping into dependence. You learn to soothe the body, observe the mind, and allow emotions to pass without needing someone else to regulate them for you. This practice builds inner steadiness. Slowly, the belief that you need another person to be whole begins to weaken. When you stop asking people to complete you, relationships become lighter and more honest. You connect because you choose to, not because you need to survive emotionally. Loss still hurts, but it no longer destroys your foundation. Buddhism teaches that this is real freedom, not isolation, but inner completeness that allows love without fear. Lesson 8. The real trap is control. One of the most exhausting habits of the mind is its need to control what cannot be controlled. When someone leaves or a situation changes, the mind does not rest. Instead, it begins working overtime. It replays conversations late at night. It rewrites moments from the past. It runs endless scenarios of what you could have said, what you should have done, and how things might have turned out differently. On the surface, this feels like reflection. In reality, it is the mind trying to regain control after losing it. Buddhism teaches that this mental replay is not wisdom. It is suffering disguised as problem solving. The mind believes that if it thinks hard enough, it can fix what has already passed. It clings to the idea that the right words, the right timing, or the right version of yourself could have prevented the loss. But this belief quietly drains your energy. You are fighting a moment that no longer exists. You can notice this trap in your body. Overthinking does not feel calm or spacious. It feels tight, restless, and urgent. The chest contracts. The jaw clenches. The mind circles the same thoughts again and again, never arriving at peace. Buddhism explains this clearly. Control is an illusion that promises safety but delivers exhaustion. The more you try to manage outcomes through thought, the more anxious and powerless you feel. At the root of this habit is fear. Fear that if you let go of control, everything will fall apart. Fear that accepting reality means giving up. But Buddhism makes an important distinction. Releasing control is not passivity. It is clarity about the limits of your influence. You can act with care. You can speak honestly. You can show up fully. But you cannot control how others feel, choose, or change. When the mind accepts this, something softens. You stop negotiating with the past. You stop punishing yourself for not being able to freeze life at a certain moment. You see that no amount of replay can bring certainty to an impermanent world. This understanding does not make you careless, it makes you grounded. Buddhism teaches that peace returns when you bring attention back to what you can actually touch. Your breath, your posture, your next action. Control keeps the mind trapped in imagined timelines. Awareness returns it to the present. In the present, there is no conversation to fix and no outcome to manage. There is only what is happening now. When you stop trying to control what has already moved, energy returns. The mind becomes quieter, not because everything worked out, but because it stopped demanding that it should have. This is the freedom Buddhism points to. Not controlling life, but no longer being controlled by the need to control. Lesson 9. A simple practice. Notice, breathe, release. When attachment pulls you back towards someone, it rarely arrives as a clear thought. It shows up as restlessness, a sudden urge to check your phone, a tight feeling in the chest, a familiar pull toward memory. Before you realize what is happening, the mind has already returned to the past. Buddhism teaches that freedom does not come from fighting this movement, but from learning how to meet it skillfully. The first step is noticing. This sounds simple, but it is powerful. Most suffering continues because attachment operates unconsciously. The mind clings automatically without being seen. When you notice the movement and silently acknowledge that the mind is clinging right now, something important happens. You step out of the story and into awareness. You are no longer inside the attachment. You are observing it. Buddhism teaches that awareness itself weakens suffering, because what is seen clearly is no longer running the mind from the shadows. Noticing is not judging. You are not telling yourself to stop or to be better. You are simply naming what is happening. The mind is pulling. The heart feels tight. Memory is active. This gentle recognition creates space. Space between you and the habit. Space where choice becomes possible. The second step is breathing. When attachment activates, the body tightens. Even if the story feels mental, the reaction is physical. The chest contracts, the shoulders lift, the belly hardens. Buddhism teaches that returning to the body stabilizes the mind. You bring attention to the breath, not to control it, but to feel it. You notice the rise and fall in the chest, the movement in the belly, the weight in the shoulders. This anchors you in the present moment, where life is actually happening. Breathing reconnects you with the here and now. The mind may still think, but the body reminds you that you are safe in this moment. Nothing needs to be fixed right now. Nothing needs to be chased. The breath becomes a bridge back to reality. The third step is release. Release does not mean pushing the feeling away. It means allowing it to exist without resistance. You let the pull be there without acting on it. You let the discomfort rise without turning it into a story. Buddhism teaches that what you allow can pass and what you resist persists. When you stop fighting the feeling, it loses its grip. Release is an inner permission. Permission for things to be as they are. Permission for longing to exist without control. Permission for reality to unfold without interference. This gentle acceptance breaks the cycle. The habit of clinging depends on reaction. When reaction stops, the habit weakens. This practice does not remove attachment instantly. Buddhism never promises instant results. What it offers is transformation through repetition. Each time you notice, breathe, and release, you interrupt the old pattern. Over time, the mind learns a new way of responding. The pull still arises, but it does not dominate. The thoughts still appear, but they pass more quickly. This is how freedom grows, not through force, but through awareness, not through suppression, but through understanding. The practice is simple, but its effect is deep. You stop being dragged by attachment, and you begin to rest again in your own presence. Lesson 10. Freedom is staying present, even when it hurts. Buddhism never teaches that freedom means the absence of pain. It teaches something far more realistic and compassionate. Freedom means staying present even when pain arises. Letting go does not mean you never miss someone. It does not mean memories disappear or emotions stop visiting. Missing is natural. Feeling is natural. What creates suffering is not the emotion itself, but the way the mind reacts to it. When someone leaves, the mind often responds by abandoning the present moment. It follows the emotion into memory, imagination, and story. It asks why this happened, what it means about you, and whether things could have been different. Without realizing it, you leave yourself behind. You stop feeling what is here and start living inside a narrative that keeps the wound open. Buddhism teaches that presence is the key difference between pain and suffering. Pain can exist in the present. Suffering is created when the mind feeds pain with interpretation and repetition. You can feel sadness in the body without turning it into a story about loss, failure, or unworthiness. When you stay with the raw sensation of emotion, without adding meaning to it, the emotion is allowed to move. This is not easy. The mind prefers stories because stories feel familiar. They give the illusion of understanding. But Buddhism points out that these stories rarely bring peace. They strengthen identification. They turn temporary emotion into a fixed identity. You are no longer feeling sadness. You become the abandoned one, the unchosen one, the one who lost something essential. Freedom begins when you notice this and choose differently. You allow the emotion to be felt in the body, but you do not follow it into narrative. You stay with the breath. You stay with sensation. You stay with the present moment. This is how you stop abandoning yourself. Letting go does not require emotional numbness. It requires honesty. You admit that it hurts without asking the pain to define you. You allow tears without asking them to explain anything. Buddhism teaches that emotions are visitors. They arrive, they stay for a while, and they leave when they are not resisted or fed. When you stop feeding the story, something surprising happens. The pain becomes cleaner. It still hurts, but it does not overwhelm. It does not pull you out of your life. You can feel sadness and still be grounded. You can grieve and still remain whole. This is the freedom Buddhism offers. Not freedom from feeling, but freedom from being controlled by feeling. You stay present even when it hurts. And in that presence, you discover a strength that does not depend on comfort or certainty. You remain with yourself, and that is what allows healing to unfold naturally. Some people leave, and the mind turns it into a life sentence. It replays what was lost, what changed, and what never returned. It convinces you that because something ended, something inside you is now permanently broken. But Buddhism points to a quieter truth. Nothing outside you was ever meant to be a permanent home. People arrive, people depart, moments form and dissolve. Suffering begins only when the mind demands that something temporary become unchanging. When you see this clearly, the chase softens. You stop running toward people to feel safe. You stop asking relationships to rescue you from uncertainty. Instead, you begin building steadiness where it was missing, inside your own awareness. You still care. You still love, you still feel, but you no longer grip. Because a peaceful heart does not beg reality to stay the same. It meets change without collapsing, and loss without self-abandonment. This is the quiet shift Buddhism offers, not hardness, not distance, but a love that is lighter, cleaner, and free from fear. You become someone who can love deeply without losing themselves. And if this way of seeing helps you breathe again, stay close. The path is quiet, but it leads far.